everyone. Welcome to our sixth episode where we are going to do a short follow-up to Career Part 2 that everyone seemed to enjoy last time.
Okay, so one thing I want to ask you is if you can be more specific on like what you do day to day in your role in strategic finance.
Yeah, so I work in strategic finance now at a consumer tech firm. So the scope of my role is multifaceted, but I would say I'm responsible for a few key things. So one, I'm responsible for forecasting the company top line performance on an annual basis, on a monthly basis, just overall, like over any period of time. I work with my manager on that. I also work with my manager to think about how some of like the growth products and products that we're launching will influence our top line or have potential to. I also am the strategic finance partner to our go-to-market teams. So that basically means that I evaluate the ROI of our spend in go-to-market, which is across sales and marketing. Yeah, that's my role.
Okay.
How about you?
The program manager role is actually very, very broad. So what I've experienced having worked at a few tech companies is the expectations for the role can be very different, even within a company. And so in my current role, I work in the trust and safety space. So I'm a program manager to make sure that a lot of the initiatives around building trust on the platform are actually implemented, and that all the various individuals who are involved in this process, including engineering, like marketing, go-to-market, are all moving in the direction to make that change for the company. So at a high level, that's what it is. And then there's also the strategic aspect about like growth for the company. So one area that I'm also working on is like evaluating what are the various geographies that we're looking to expand to as a company, and like what are the considerations that we should think about as part of that, and what are the gaps that exist that need to be plugged in order to expand geographically. So those are two areas of scope that I work on now.
In the lens of trust and safety.
Yeah. How do you view career in the scope of your overall life now as compared to when you first started your career, and has that changed?
Yeah, I feel like everyone still spends the majority of their life working, so like work is a meaningful part of it. But for me, I also need time after work to enjoy other things and my weekends.
Yeah, especially having come from like a very demanding, like long hours type of role.
Yeah, I think that made me realize that I just didn't want to live like that for the rest of my life, basically. Yeah. So I think my perspective now is a lot more well-balanced than it was, or I didn't really know anything when I started working, but I'm more well-balanced now. Yeah, how about you?
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. I think in our early 20s, we definitely prioritize career a lot more because it's a new space, and also you're working to build up like finances in a way that you can like sustain your lifestyle. And I think because of that, there is a lot of effort that goes into like getting to the next level, getting promoted. And I think nowadays, after having gone through like a decade of career life, I feel like you start to realize that getting to the next level starts to become a little harder as you become more senior. And so while it may have taken like maybe 1 or 2 years to get promoted to the next level early in career, as you move up, it gets harder and harder because there's less room and scope for all like junior individuals to reach like director or more executive levels as you move up in a company. And so I think nowadays, given that reality, and now realizing that I'm now at a point that I can sustain my current lifestyle, I don't have as much of a priority to continue like moving in that direction, like to the level that I did in my early career. Yeah. Like
still work hard and do our best, but like just more balanced.
Yeah, definitely a lot more balanced. And I think nowadays I prioritize like enriching my life outside of work as well. So trying to be more intentional about like interests and friends and caring for my family. Like those aspects are also very important to me, more so than earlier in my career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's interesting because obviously I'm a little bit younger than you are, so I feel like
Yeah.
I'm still at the stage where there's probably still like low-hanging fruit, so to speak, in being able to move up. But I was like watching someone else talk about this topic a few days ago, and they were talking about how like at some point you need to evaluate like the stress of getting to the next role and like the responsibility and stress that it brings for you, and along with the comp change that it would bring to you, and whether that's even meaningful to you as an individual.
Yeah, it's like evaluating the pros and cons. Like, yes, you will have more money, but you'll have less time.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what is actually important for you? And I think knowing us as individuals, like we're always going to be have that drive to improve and move up in our careers. But I think just having a little more intentionality in what you prioritize in life becomes more upfront as you progress in your career and get older.
Okay, so the follow-up question to this is, what is something that you would have done before that you would not do now? That is an example of this like mindset.
One thing that I did was when I was going for my latest promotion, it definitely took a toll on everything else in my life, because when you're going for promotion, you're really like grinding it out, right? You're putting a lot of effort into work, and work becomes more a larger part of your life. And so as a result, I sacrificed more of like my social life or more of my hobbies, and I wasn't able to really invest there as much. And so I would say like that aspect of like sacrificing certain things that are important for you was a downside of doing that. But I also wouldn't say I regret that, because I think it's important, especially like in early career, to continue making efforts to advance your career. Especially even now, I still try to, but just having it more in perspective, I think is really important.
I think that's natural, because I feel like most people, like, I believe that you can achieve what you want to go and achieve, but you can't do it all at once, is my perspective on it. So some things have to give because you have limited resources, energy, and time. Yeah.
I think especially as you enter your 30s and you start thinking about family and kids, like kind of going back to our episode on parenthood, it's like there's some things that you have to sacrifice more. And is it career or other areas to have children and family, or would you sacrifice family to focus more on your career? And it's really up to the individual to decide that.
I'm still a little ways away from being in my 30s, but I think that also, now that I am on the more inside of a corporation, like working in corporate, now that I see like the operational sausage making, that is basically like the decision every single day is like, what are the trade-offs that you make, because everything has its puts and takes, like you can't have it all. Okay, so I guess as a follow-up to that, we were talking about how it gets harder and harder to get promoted over time, which everyone knows is natural, but can you like go into detail as to why that is?
So earlier in your career, a lot of the skills that you're evaluated on are kind of like what we talked about in the last episode, where it's like how do you show up in the workplace? Are you proactive? Are you a good communicator? So they're kind of more like soft skills that are easier to obtain. Also, younger, more junior employees are, from a business sense, they're paid less. And so from a business standpoint, it is easier for them to promote like more junior employees, because the incremental increase in their salaries are smaller than it would be when you're higher up in your career.
You're pretty cheap.
It's pretty cheap. And I think the higher up you move up in an organization, not only do you get paid more and there's more cost for you as an employee to the company, but also the skills that are required start to become a lot more like strategic for the company, and there's less need for that, like a large volume of that type of role.
That's right.
Potentially. I would say that's what it is. So it's kind of like a pyramid. Like imagine like junior levels there make up the bottom of the pyramid, but then as you go up higher in the pyramid, there's like less volume at the top, and there's like a CEO at the top. There's only one, right? And I think there's more politics that are involved the higher up you go, because of course the more money you cost as an employee, as like a senior manager or director. And so therefore, there's more considerations that need to take place at a leadership level to consider having you at that level.
But the other piece is like the more expensive you are, the more you need to justify basically your existence at the company.
Yeah, and there needs to be a business scope for you.
Yes.
Yeah, and the value you bring is a lot more specific.
Yes.
Like you're there to drive growth for a very specific area.
Yes.
Like versus at a junior level, there's many more junior level employees that might do very similar work, and that's okay for the company. Yeah.
And the more senior you are, the less you have the benefit of the doubt when you get hired. You're hired for your experience and expertise, and people want to know that you've done whatever you are hired to do at least a few times before and executed well and been the person to have done it.
So I'm curious, now that we've had experience being like individual contributors in the workplace, what is your perspective on IC versus a manager role? And do you have a preference?
But my perspective on this within like at least finance teams in general is that you can probably get to like a mid-level to senior mid-level role as an individual contributor, but if you want to advance more than that, then you have to have management skills. So being an IC, I think, will only get you so far.
So in a finance role at a tech company, why is it that it's more common for individuals to move out of the IC role into a manager role?
I think the scope of the team and the size of the team just dictates that like you don't need that many team members. So if you want to move up, like you just have to be willing to manage people below you.
And it seems like it kind of takes on a similar structure as like a finance company in a way.
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit. I think there's more flexibility for sure, but generally I think eventually you will need to be willing to manage people. Okay, so how is IC and managerial different in your view, and like what would your preference be and your thinking be on the two?
Okay, so I would say within tech, there's many different areas of work. Like there's engineering, there's more technical roles, and then there's also the business side. And so from my experience working on the business side, there's typically two tracks where people can go into. There is the IC track and the managerial track, and individuals can choose that. So it's a little different from a typical like client services role where you automatically get promoted into a managerial role once you reach a certain point. And the reason why it's designed like that is because it's supposed to allow individuals to grow in the space that they feel that their strengths are. So if someone feels like they're more of an individual contributor and they're stronger in that route, then they can continue going up the ladder there. Or if they feel like they're better people managers, then they can move to the people management track and move up there. So that's one thing that I personally enjoy working in the space that I am in within tech on the business side, because then I know that I actually enjoy individual contributor work more. And the reason behind that is because I feel like I have a more direct impact on the work that I'm doing. Like I'm directly working with all the stakeholders. I am problem solving to create and develop areas of work, which I think as a manager within tech, I've noticed that a lot more of the focus is on career development of your team and the ICs that report to you, and also a lot more like higher level thinking for the business. So less direct tactical work is being done, which I think has value in itself. But I would say some cons of being in the managerial side of things is that you don't always have control over the individuals on your team. So while you might have like all-stars on your team that are very great, there could also be poor performers, and you have to navigate working with poor performers on your team and how to motivate them and how to improve their performance, which can be very hard because you can't control someone's work ethic, like their motivations, etc. But I do think there are benefits of being a manager, which are when you have that ability to influence someone's career, it can be also very fulfilling to up-level someone, to work with very strong contributors on your team. And so I would say that's my perspective on the IC and manager route.
Do you feel like there's a ceiling as an individual contributor, that like a ceiling to your career progression as an individual contributor eventually?
I do think that there can be a ceiling in certain roles. So my role, for example, I'm a program manager, and I think once you reach like senior to staff levels, there starts to become a ceiling, because your role becomes a little bit more gray with people management's roles.
Yeah.
Because in people management roles, you're thinking about like strategy for the business, like how to improve the company as a whole. And the more senior you get as an IC, you're also thinking about those things as well. So it starts to become more gray. And so as an IC, there's less area to get up level to as a program manager, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way that I would describe it for finance, or what I've seen like within the current org that I'm in, is basically like eventually there's only so much work you can do as an individual, and if you have people working under you, then your like scope is larger, and therefore like you have more impact because of that, and then you're delivering more value, and hence you can become more senior because of that. So like the people under you is essentially leverage for you to widen your scope and get promoted.
Yeah. And I think this is a very good point, because I think when you become like senior manager, director, to the point about leveraging, a lot of times the career progression is about like how many people are under you in your organization, and at what extent are you like influencing that large group of people. And I think that is what helps with that progression in your career, versus as an IC, you don't have anybody reporting to you, so yeah, there's less leverage.
But that also makes it more comfortable, I think.
Yeah.
To work as an IC.
There's less like responsibility, I would say.
Yeah.
Like
less BS.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I enjoy working as an IC, because I don't have to deal with the BS as much.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say one thing that's been interesting is that in my role as a program manager, while I'm not managing people, I'm still managing.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of the internal BS that does happen. Like at a higher level, because as a program manager, I'm working at leadership with leadership as well, and so I can see like how decisions are made, what's being discussed, and I'm like, oh, like dang, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm curious in terms of managers, what is the worst manager that you've ever had?
Okay, so I would say that the preface of this is that I obviously worked in client services, then I worked in banking, and then I worked in private equity for 2 years. And so the issue with those two industries is that you don't really have a choice of whether you become a manager or not most of the time. Like those two industries is like, as you move up, you naturally manage people, and sometimes people are just frankly not trained to do it whatsoever. Right. That is like an industry-wide issue. So I think the worst manager that I've ever had basically is the issue is that they were not trained to do any sort of managerial experience. So like, one, they could not figure out like what the people above them were trying to like deliver. So they constantly just like did not deliver value. And then because of that, there was a ton of swirl at the junior levels on like what work was supposed to be done and prioritized. And like they would basically make you do meaningless work, and then like you would have to constantly like be at their whim on when to go do something else. So it was just like a total waste of time doing things. And then on top of that, they like lacked communication ability.
Oh my god.
So like they would they basically like would forget to communicate things from like higher levels down to the junior levels, and then they would like forget about certain projects or leave them on the back burner but not tell junior levels that they were on the back burner, which also resulted in a ton of wasted time.
How did they even get to that level without, if they don't know how to communicate? How did
I genuinely don't know, but that is one person, by the way. That's the worst manager I've ever worked for.
What happened to that manager?
I stopped working for them.
Did they get fired?
I don't want to talk about that.
Nice.
Anyways, yeah.
I think that's the challenge with...
That's always the challenge.
Like, it's the challenge where, kind of like what we were talking about, the two tracks. Individuals should be given the choice to become a manager because they'll be more set up for success that way versus being forced into a position to be a manager when they may not have the skill sets.
But she has no choice. Like, that is the
way she had no choice, and so therefore she was getting
she
not being
sucks.
set up for success.
She sucked. Okay.
I haven't had a manager like absolutely horrendous before, but I can share two examples.
Okay.
I can share two examples. So I think the one that was most frustrating for me was kind of a similar boat where she became a manager but had a lot of experience as an IC. So when she became a manager, it was very like it was like she couldn't let go of being an IC. So
that's very common.
Yeah. So when she was a manager, she would try to do the work. Her ICs would give her a deliverable and she'd be like, hold on, and she'll go in and like, edit everything as if she was the one doing it. And so I would say that was a big challenge because it's like a good manager would give an individual contributor the space to do the work on their own, and hold them accountable and responsible for the work. So I think that created a lot of thrash from her team.
Yeah.
Another example that I had was I had a manager who would always yell. Like on the phone, I would hear like him yelling at his employees. Thankfully, he never did it to me directly, but it was like everybody could hear on the floor, and I was like, dang, like I would not want to be on the receiving end of that. And his team actually had a lot of turnover, including me. I left his team.
Wow, surprise!
So yeah, so I felt like when individuals are constantly leaving, you know that it's like there must be something wrong at a leadership level as well. So yeah, those were my examples of bad managers.
Yeah.
All right, so having worked in various industries, what would you say are common stereotypes of, like, for example, the finance, like PE space?
Okay, so this is more of a fun topic. Let's go by industry. So tech, banking, and private equity. I can go first on private equity. I think the pervasive stereotype right now is that private equity is evil. I wouldn't say that the people who work in it are evil, or like it's hard to counteract the fact that some of it has been bad for society. I think the fact, or debunking that myth or stereotype, is the fact that like basically everyone in the industry is just focused on making money, and that is the core value of the industry and the core value of the firms. And because of that, then your other values get secondary or third, as opposed to, like, I would say maybe like for the general public, these values are re-ranked. That's it.
What about for banking? Like, is it true that the stereotype is very like Wolf of Wall Street, like drugs, toxic environments?
I think it can be like that, but the reality is that the industry is more diverse now, like, because a lot of people know about it, and also people are probably too tired most days to do anything with their life. Yeah, if you're working until 3 or 4 a.m., you probably don't have the energy to go out afterwards.
What about like the drugs piece?
Oh, that's common.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like how?
I think a lot of people take performance enhancing drugs for sure, because you just need to stay focused throughout the entire time. Yeah.
Oh, so during the workday, like, you probably will have interacted with people who...
I think Adderall is very common in the industry. Yeah.
Okay. Not like cocaine though, like in Wolf of Wall Street.
I don't know if it is.
We wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a suspicion that it is common because it's generally common in New York in general. Like,
yeah,
so many people do it, but I wouldn't know. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Okay, how about tech?
Yeah. So tech, the stereotypes I feel like are definitely different. Like where I feel like in finance, feels like a lot more toxic kind of like type A stereotype. Mm-hmm. With tech, there's a stereotype of chillness, which I don't know if I fully agree with, but I think the stereotype is like get paid a lot of money and they are also just sitting around not doing anything while raking in all the perks and benefits of being in tech.
Yeah.
I would say that's a common stereotype.
Yeah.
I'm not an engineer. I work more on the business side, and I think on the business side, there is an element where because we're trying to make strategic decisions for the business, that in itself can be kind of stressful. And the work-life balance, I wouldn't say has been super, super chill. Of course, it depends largely on the role that you are in and the team that you're in. But I don't feel like I'm constantly like sitting around like how the stereotype says. I think the other aspect too is within tech and non-tech roles, technical teams do have a lot more equity in their compensation. And so I think from that aspect, the compensation is actually a lot higher and they do get paid a lot on the tech side. On the business side, there tends to be less equity in in compensation. And so that stereotype of getting paid a lot is less on the business side. But I would say the industry as a whole does get decent compensation compared to the market. So would like to add that caveat in there.
Yeah, I think post layoffs world, we're still going through layoffs in the tech industry.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone is slacking at this point.
Yeah.
And if they are, then it's probably for individualized reasons and not as like a common industry kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agreed. I would say post layoffs performance culture has become a lot higher. Individuals are more evaluated on like the value they bring and like how they're meeting expectations against the goals for the company. And so there's less room to just chill at the job than maybe there was previously before COVID.
That's okay though, because the worst feeling in the world is you're grinding and the person next to you is chilling. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess the silver lining is that everyone is on the same page.
Okay, fun question for you. If you could swap your career with anybody for a day, what would you choose?
I think I would go choose to become president for a day. It seems like an interesting role with a lot of impact on the world. President of the United States, to be specific.
Oh my god, that sounds like hell. Are you sure you want that job?
Why not? It's just for a day.
Why would you want that job?
Because it just seems like you have so much control over everything around you and you can just go do whatever you want. So, let's see. Like, it would be interesting to see the day-to-day of the role. Oh, yeah. Okay. What would I do? Would I just sit there because I don't know anything about the role, so I'm just like in learning mode for the day? Would I try to manipulate the stock market so that I can make a lot of money from the day? Would I do things for like the good of society or that are aligned with my values? Like change all the funding? Well, I guess you can't finish that in a day. That takes time to push through Congress. But maybe I would try to do things in the day that would like align with my values and change things a little bit in society that align with my values. TBD.
What about if you came in having all the skills that you needed for the role? So skip the learning mode and you just went in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would try to make as much impact as I could on society in the single day that I had. And I would know because I would have the skill set to know what I could get done and not get done.
Yeah. But the thing with being president of the USA is that there's a lot of checks and balances.
Seems like the checks and balances are a little bit out of whack right now.
Or you can just sign executive orders.
Yeah, I would just sign some executive orders. But because I would know the system, I think I would know the best way to push through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, how about you? What would you do?
Okay, so I have a realistic answer and I have a idealistic answer. My idealistic is that I think maybe I would become like a professional athlete, like a successful professional athlete for a day and see what that is like.
Okay.
Because I think successful professional athletes, like, they make a lot of money. They make millions when they win games. They also have lots of sponsorships.
Okay.
And they're being active, and I enjoy doing sports. So I'd be curious what it's like to be that person at a really high level.
Specifically who?
I think I would be a male professional athlete because I think...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I do think that there's inequality in the sports world between male and female.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, so probably like maybe a professional basketball player because they, like,
nice.
NBA is like top
LeBron
tier.
James.
Yeah, like top tier.
Okay.
Like I maybe would have said tennis, but I don't feel like tennis gets paid as much as basketball does. I could be wrong.
Okay, yeah.
So I'd be curious about that. I would like to see kind of the routine that athletes go through in a day to reach their fitness levels and perform well. But aside from that, I think my realistic answer is I think I'd like to step out of a corporate world and experience a life as a small business owner.
Okay.
What that is like.
It's probably really stressful.
Yeah, it's probably stressful, but then there could be an element of like greater fulfillment because you might be running a business that you care about more.
Yep.
Yeah. That concludes this episode. Hope you enjoyed our career part 2. Stay tuned for the next one.